Hello and happy Wednesday. So y'all, I'm getting straight into the message today. I'm going to be quick. I'm going to be fast. I got off work, so I'm a little bit exhausted, but I have to bring you Wisdom Wednesday today, no matter how I'm feeling. If I had to put a title on today's message, that title would be, you are anointed to tell your story. You're anointed to tell your story. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a past, and everybody is anointed to tell their story. Don't nobody have a story like you, because you are unique. Your past is unique. Yeah, of course, we go through similar things in life, but everybody has their own unique story and past. And the reason I'm bringing this message to you, because telling your story could bless another person. Telling your story, you just don't know that telling your story may be exactly what that other person needs to go through what they're going to, or to push past the storm that they're in. When you tell your testimony may be that other person's roadmap, how to get out of whatever they went through that was similar to what you was going through. Many of y'all already know, who watch me, y'all know I wrote my very first book. I don't claim to be a writer, never been anointed to write. I was the type of child growing up, I couldn't even conjugate verbs, okay? But God told me, it don't matter. You ain't making excuses like Moses. You're going to tell your story, because your story is going to help somebody else. And so I decided to write the book and tell my story. Did I have a good past? Absolutely not. But I already knew there were people who had went through similar things that I had went through. There are people on Maury that lets me know they went through the same thing you went through. Teenage pregnancy, went through the same thing that I went through. But sometimes people get stuck in situations and circumstances, and they don't know how to come out of it. And they don't know that on the other side of their test is their testimony. That on the other side, God got a blessing with their name on it. On the other side of the storm is the sun. A lot of people don't realize that. That's why it's so important to tell your story. Sometimes people have been down for so long, getting up ain't even on their mind. But when you tell your story, maybe, just maybe, they'll think about getting up. I know when I wrote the book, I cannot tell you how many calls I have received saying, thank you, sis, for telling your story. Because I'm a firm believer, and people who genuinely know me know this. I don't mind being naked if it's going to help you uncover yourself. Because what God is trying to do, he ain't trying to bless the fake us, the phony us, the cover up us. He's trying to bless the real us. And so that means sometimes we just have to open up and lay before God so that he can heal us and he can make us whole. Sometimes God wants us to tell our story, not just so for people to gossip about us, but to bless another person who's going through something similar in your life. We got to learn how to open our mouth and tell our stories. We are anointed to tell our stories. Another thing we have to do, and this just hit me because on my way to work this morning, you all, and I want to make this short, but I have to tell you this. Not only are you anointed to tell your story, open your mouth when God blesses you. Open your mouth when God answers a prayer. Open your mouth when God does something miraculous in your life. Just this morning, something had transpired at work that had never happened with me before. My supervisor gave me something to do, or shall I say the dean of the college, that's my supervisor. For those of you who know me, know I'm a nursing instructor. And I've never done this before, but I completely forgot to do it. Now, here we are. It's Wednesday. It was due Friday, okay? This was due Friday. And so I was like, oh my God, I forgot to do something. I quickly emailed her and stuff, and she was like, well, it's too late to turn it in, blah, blah, blah. When I tell y'all, I'm like, oh my goodness, my heart sort of sunk in my chest. I felt a little bit embarrassed. I felt bad because I'm like, man, because this wasn't no little bitty mistake. This was like something big, y'all. And I don't want to get into it because that's not what the message is about. But what I said to her was, I said, the person that I was supposed to turn it into, I'm going to contact them and see if they will let me turn it in late. She said, okay, give it a shot. She said, but I doubt it. This is what she told me. And so I emailed the person. She didn't email back. I called her. And then finally, about an hour later, before the lady called me back, But in between that hour of me waiting, I didn't just wait. I got on my knees and I prayed. And I said, Lord, you know, right now I'm standing in need of your help. And I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. And I like, God, you got to fix this. You got to fix this. You got to help me. And it's one thing knowing that when you come to end of you, you come to the beginning of God. So I asked God to intervene on my behalf. I asked him to move like he never moved before. I asked him to open the heart of the person that I was emailing, that they would accept the documents that I was trying to turn in late. I just asked God to move on my behalf. I asked God for grace. I asked him for mercy. And one thing about me, and people who are close to me, they know this. Usually when I pray and I really, really, really want something, and sometimes it ain't something physical or material, because usually I don't put a time frame on stuff like that. But when it comes to God, I just really need to hear from you. I just really, really need you to move. I start putting a time frame on that thing when I'm praying. I'm like, God, I need you to answer this prayer by 12 noon. I need you to do this in the next 15 minutes. And that's the way I pray. And so I prayed. And when I got through praying, I checked my email again. She still haven't responded. I'm like, man, normally this person responds back quickly. Come to find out, when she did come, she wasn't even at work today, and she just so happened to check the email on her phone. Show you how God is moving, right? She checked the email on her phone. Anyway, I said, you know what? It's no sense in stressing about this. You have already given this to God. Go ahead, get ready for work, and go on. So I went, got in the shower. I got dressed. I checked my email one more time. Still hadn't heard from her. So I was going to go to God in prayer again. And I'm like, no, God, you got this. I know you got this. I said, Lord, I'm finna drive from Mississippi to downtown Memphis. I need for you to move before I pull up in that parking lot on Union. That was my prayer. I got in the car. I started driving. And you guys, I lied to you not. By the time I pulled out of my subdivision, do you hear me? By the time I pulled out of the subdivision, I seen a text message, a message come up, because I have my emails on my phone too. A message come up from the person that I was emailing. I instantly pulled over to the side of the road to open the email up. And the message said, of course, I accept your late submission. No problem. I understand things happen, blah, 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 blah. And so I instantly, then tears just started running down my eyes, and I began to start just thanking God. The reason I was crying, because I know I'm so undeserving of God's blessing. I know I'm so undeserving of his grace and his mercy, but he gives it to me anyway. He showered me with it every day. I know that a wretched sinner like me is undeserving of his love, but he gives it to me anyway. He's kind, he's long-suffering, he's patient with me. Even when I'm not with other people, even when I don't do what I'm supposed to do, he still loves me, and he's still trying to save me. And when he answered that prayer that quickly, it just brought me to tears. And that's why we have to open our mouth and tell somebody. Not only tell people our story, but tell people about the goodness of God, what he has done for you, the prayers he had answered, how he is still moving behind the scenes, how he is still editing our stories. We all got a story. We all got a past, but guess what? Our past ain't our future. You know why? Because we got a divine editor who's editing our story, that our past, our future is not going to look like our past, that on the other side of that storm, it will be some, because we got a divine editor that's just rewriting it. If you think about a canvas of a picture, what we have literally done, and my daughter, she did this in a poem one day, and she talked about how our life is like a blank canvas, and what we do, we take that blank canvas and we make a mess. Do you hear me? A hot mess, a whole mess out of that blank canvas. And then once we make a mess of it and we look at it and we like, oh my goodness, this is a mess. Then we try to take our mess and hand it to God. But God is so good. He's so loving. Thank you, Lord. He's so kind that he takes that canvas and he redo it and he paint the picture that he originally created in the beginning. He redoes it. When I tell you we serve an awesome God, you all, that's why we have to open our mouth and tell somebody our story. Tell somebody our story. I remember when I first got into church, I ain't gonna sit here and lie and act like I grew up in church, because I didn't. I started going to church in my 20s. But I remember going to church and looking at the adults in the church, because I was like 21 then. But when I say adults, I'm talking about people older than me, 40 and 50. And in church, they act like they holy, they act like they righteous, they act like they ain't got no past. And it almost just makes you feel bad. And sometimes, if you notice, for us parents, sometimes we do this with our children. Our children make mistakes, they mess up, and we act like it's the worst thing in the world. But we don't open our mouth and tell them, you know what, I did the same thing. I messed up too. I'm not perfect either. But once we get old and get saved, and a lot of us, the only reason we in church because we know we old and about half dead, and we just trying to make it to heaven. But we don't think about all the time we had our fun, we messed up, we sinned, we lied, we fornicated, we did it all. But then when our kids, we try to act like we holy rollers, like we so righteous and like we ain't made mistakes. But how about if we told our story? How about, like, my kids, they know my story. They know everything about their mom. I didn't leave no stone unturned. And the reason I did that was to let them know it's okay to make mistakes. But even in your mistake, you got to pick yourself up. And I don't care how many times you pick yourself up and you keep going. You keep trying. You keep aiming for what you're trying to do. One of the things I see with parents and I see with church people, we never just tell people our story. We never tell people it's okay, you messed up, try it again. What if somebody had told me that coming up? Okay, you had a child at 16, but you can get through this. And the reason I'm saying this, because we have to let people know on the other side of that mistake is actually going to become our ministry. That mistake is going to become our ministry. I had such a hard time as a young woman, as a teenager, as a young woman. That's why my passion now is women, young women. That's why I started the whole Better Woman, Better Wife ministry. That's why I go out of my way in young women, women in their 30s. I'm 50. Women in their 20s and 30s, they can tell you, people know me, oh, Felicia gonna go out of her way for you, to support you, to encourage you, to inspire, to do whatever I have to do to help uplift another woman, because I know what it's like. But what if, and this is a question I was going to ask a few minutes ago, what if instead of bashing our kids or bashing that young person in church and bashing them, oh, you doing wrong, oh, God gonna get you for this, or oh, this is just the worst mistake ever, how could you do this, how can you make this great, how can you do this, how can you do, how about saying, you know what, I did that too, and let me tell you what the end, it ends to a dead road. Oh, I made that mistake, but nothing good comes from it. Hey, I got pregnant at 16, but let me tell you how hard it was for me. You may not want to go down that road. And so when we begin to tell people, hey, I've been there and this is what it leads to, maybe they will make a decision not to do it simply because you chose to share your story. Maybe they won't, maybe they will. But at least they would think about, even if they don't take your advice at the time, maybe they'll think about, you know what? I remember so-and-so telling me her story, and I didn't take her advice at the time, but guess what? I remember she got through it, and she's a better person because of it today. Somebody had read my book, and one of the questions that they asked me is, if I had the chance to do it all over again, and if I had the choice for things to be different, would I have done things different? And my answer was a resounding no. I would do everything, because my past, my mistakes made me who I am today. And it was a time in my life I was ashamed of my past. I'm not ashamed no more, because God has freed me, and no man on this earth, on this planet, has a heaven or hell to put me in. So I live my life striving to help somebody else just get through to the other side, because we all, either we're going in a storm, about to enter a storm, we're in a storm, or we're coming out of a storm. But the only problem with that is, when you in the storm, it's hard to see that you're going to get to the other side. Sometimes you just don't see that, because things are so hard, and sometimes you don't think you're going to make it. If you're thinking about driving on the expressway, sometimes it be raining, it be thundering, it be pouring down so hard, you be like, I can't make it to my destination. And so what do? We pull over until the storm stops. And that's what people sometimes they do in life. The storm is so heavy, they pull over instead of keep going. One of the things my husband told me, and I think I did this on another video that I had did, but I'm gonna share it again for this purpose. One of the things my husband told me, because him and I, we travel all the time, but this is when we had first started traveling years ago. And we would, team drive. And so it was my time to drive, and we was headed to Texas, and I was under the wheel. And so we had made it, our destination was Dallas, but we had made it to Texarkana. I would never forget it. And when I tell you that it was raining cats and dogs, it was raining cats and dogs. And people had started pulling over. And so I was about to pull over. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm about to pull over. I can't see." He said, "No, keep going." I said, "But I can't see." He said, "Keep going." I said, "But it's raining hard, babe." He said, "But keep going." He said, "Let me tell you something. Don't ever, ever stop in the storm." He said, "If you keep driving, I promise you're going to run out of the storm." And so nervously, I kept driving, and I promise you, it probably wasn't another 2 miles, and I ran out of the storm. And when I got 2 miles outside the storm, the sun was so bright, it looked like it wasn't even raining behind me. And that's the way it is with people. When you in it, you can't see the other side. But the person who has made it to the other side knows what's on the other side. That's why you need to tell the person in the storm, "Keep going, sis. Keep going, bruh. Keep going, child. Keep going, church member. Keep going." Because on the other side of that storm, God got a blessing for you. On the other side of that storm, something good is about to happen. The sun is about to shine again in your life. But you got to keep going. Don't pull over. Because sometimes what happens in life, people pull over, but they don't get back on the road again. That's why you have to tell your story. You are anointed to tell your story, and can't nobody tell your story like you tell your story. Can't nobody tell my story like I told my story. I told my story in the book, and I laid everything out. But couldn't nobody tell my story like I told my story. They can tell you bits and pieces of my story, but they can't tell my story, because my story is my story. And so that's all I have for Wisdom Wednesday. I hope that if you didn't take away nothing else, that you take away, tell your story. Tell somebody about how good God is, how he's moving, and how he's answering prayers, how he's still trying to save. Just open your mouth. And just opening your mouth can be a blessing. I think about if somebody had opened their mouth when I was coming up, a lot of the mistakes that I made, I probably wouldn't have made. A lot of the things that I went through probably wouldn't have went through if somebody had opened their mouth and shared their story with me. But it's okay, because I'm good. I'm just going to make sure that I open my mouth for that sister, that young sister, that daughter, that cousin, that niece, that nephew, that church member that's coming behind me. I got to open my mouth. I got to tell that teenager that's pregnant, you're going to be okay. You're going to make it to the other side. I got to tell that mother who don't know where their child is, they still have a heavenly Father, and they're going to be okay. I got to tell that person who grew up without a dad in their life, you're going to be okay. God got you. I got to open my mouth and tell somebody. I got to open my mouth and tell that person, okay, you may be homeless and in your car like I was with a 1-year-old child, but guess what? God going to provide shelter for you. I got to open my mouth and tell somebody how God brought me through. I got to open my mouth and tell somebody about my Damascus Road experience. I got to open my mouth and tell somebody about my Red Sea experience. I got to open my mouth. It's just that serious. I pray you all be blessed. Leave a message. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Like and subscribe to my channel. As I always say, be blessed and be better.